Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm with eLearning Brothers. Today we're going to be talking about Genius Content Strategies for LMS Reporting. This webinar will be recorded and we will get a copy of it sent out to everyone who's in attendance. If you have questions during this webinar, we'll be ready to answer your questions in the questions panel, and we'll try to bring those up to our presenter as well, our guests, so feel free to use that questions panel as you need it. We'll get to as many of these questions as we can. If there's some that we just don't get to, we'll try to reach out to you directly or post that in a blog where we will post this recap later in the week. Just so you know, one of the things that we like to do after the webinar is try to follow up as soon as possible. Sometimes it's just to get feedback. Most of the time we do want to touch base and find out if anybody needs some one-on-one clarification about the webinar topic after the fact. Also, we are going to be giving everyone in attendance a free eLearning Brothers account if you don't already have one. So that will be coming to your email inbox. You can be looking forward to that. All right, to talk to us about LMS reporting, we have Sam Rogers of Synapse with us today. Thanks for joining us, Sam. We're excited to hear what you have to share. And that's enough for me. So I will go ahead and turn the time over to you, Sam, and make you the presenter.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrew.
All right, looks great.
Cool, thanks. Well, so glad to have all of you here today to look at Genius Content Strategies. Now, there will be no pictures of Einstein here. I am not the genius. What we're here to talk about is some genius strategies, ways that you can be the smart one in your learning organization, even if you're just a department of one, being able to ask better questions and to make content that really can achieve the goals that you are making content for in the first place. So a little bit about me, Sam Rogers. I have done a lot of learning management system implementations, done a lot with reporting. I'm also a senior content designer and ecosystem engineer, and have done a lot of troubleshooting of systems as well as senior ID work for companies you may have heard of like Google. So I have about 20 years of experience in learning and development, and also am in a wide variety of other things. You may have seen me on Learning Now TV. I have little regular spots I do there, most recently about data and how we use reporting, also often about mobile video. I do podcasts. I helped organize the Digital Learning Asset Framework, tackling topics like we'll be talking about today. And enough about me. I speak lots of places and do lots of stuff. If you have questions anytime, as Andrew already said, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. You can use the Ask a Question function. If you're watching the recording of today, please feel free to tweet. Tweet it to Synapse. That's me, that's my company. But just keep the questions coming anytime. We want to make sure that we are giving you what you need, what you value. This is building on a webinar that was delivered called Making Friends with Your LMS for the eLearning Brothers on April 3rd of 2018. And in that webinar, we were looking at things from more of the learning management system perspective. We tend to think of our learning management systems as these old archaic kinds of things. We were looking at making friends with that, some of the most common mistakes. We're going to be looking at some similar things from that. Actually, the greatest number of questions that came in from that webinar were around content and content reporting. So that's what this is building off of, and you can find that in the eLearning Brothers archive of webinars. If any of the slides that I'm showing here are things that you want to know about, go check that out. Lots of great stuff in the archive. So there we looked at like the LMS features and functionality and how to tell when you need functions and turning stuff like that on and off. But this content part of what are the values that the content is passing to the LMS. We're looking specifically at online courses often. That's kind of what we're focusing on. But what kind of records does the LMS keep? That's totally relevant to your content strategy. What kind of reports are you producing with your LMS? Now, we're not going to be talking about stuff that's specific to one LMS. I've worked with a bunch of them. They all kind of do the same thing. And none of them do it that great, honestly. But that first part of what is in the content and how that relates, how that is making friends with the LMS is really critical. So oftentimes when we're looking at content, we're having some kind of an assessment, often a multiple choice assessment, and we press the right thing, and then the right thing happens, and people say, great work, okay, yes, I'm awesome, I know this thing. And then the course, that piece of online content, is saying to the user, great, you scored 100%, you passed. That's the user's experience. In the background, whether it's SCORM or AICC or XAPI, however it is that the reporting is happening, that message is getting relayed to the LMS as a separate action than what the learner sees. So it's entirely possible, as maybe you've had the opportunity to troubleshoot before, it's entirely possible that the learner can see something. It's a screen like this. But what the LMS gets is something that's not quite that. And it's really important to know that those things are different. What the LMS is receiving are things like the enrollment status, registered, in progress, complete. How it interprets that as a completion status is a setting on your LMS. Again, we won't be diving into that. Go to the other webinar for that. But just as a basis here, as an overview, whether something is going to be set as pass complete or pass or complete incomplete as the threshold, the score, what is it that's triggering that? Now we're starting to get into some of the content stuff that we can dive into today. But really, what does complete mean is something different for your content than it is for the LMS. It just reports on it differently. So hopefully it aligns, hopefully it's serving the same goal, but that user experience, what it is that you're testing when you're building something and testing it in your online course publisher, that experience is a little different than what the LMS gets. And it was a big surprise to folks when we talked about it last time that, wait, it's different? Like I can make something that says that they failed, but they got 100% and they're complete. Well, yeah, you can. And there are actually instances where you might want to do that depending on your content strategy. So with all of this, the thing that keeps it from getting too complicated, the thing that keeps it from getting overwhelming is defining success. So let's just start right now, get some engagement here in the chat, if you wouldn't mind. If this very webinar was a total and complete success, you got exactly what you came here for, what would happen? What would that be? So please throw some things there in the chat if you would. And as you're doing that, I'll just speak a little bit more about why this is important, defining success. It's not just for us to define our own success. More and more money is getting spent on training. And that's systems, that's content, and more that reporting piece as well. That reporting piece becomes so much more important as more money gets spent, right? There's a bit more oversight. And even if no one's knocking on your door asking for some stuff that shows the value of the content that you're creating right now, chances are that knock's going to come on the door pretty soon. And in slides such as this, this is the most recent information that we have available from Training Magazine as of November, December last year. Well, it's now about a year old, and you know what? A year from now, we should be showing a different slide, right? This content, anything you're making, anything that you're delivering, it will expire. And this becomes extremely important for your strategy for reporting on it. As I mentioned, there's the course, there's the content that you're making, there's the LMS, this fuzzy arrow in between of how one communicates with the other. Well, maybe you've had this experience before. You're working with an Articulate course, say, and something's happening and it's not reporting correctly on the LMS. And your LMS, you go to that vendor and they say, oh, well, that's not us. That's not the LMS. That's the course. Oh, okay. Go and talk to Articulate, maybe post on their forums. Oh, yeah, that's not us. No, that's the LMS. Okay. There's this bit in between that really is critical for you as a designer, as a developer, to at least know a little bit about, be able to ask smart questions about, that helps the work that you do make a difference. It helps it be reported as showing value. And that's really what I wanted to dive into today. So hopefully that's been enough time to get
responses already, Sam.
Yeah,
from
great.
Your last question. Here's some of the responses to that sentence. I would have 3 actionable things to do after this webinar.
Okay.
I could add something to a report that would show value to the content I created. I would retain more the first time. Performance metrics are produced.
Okay.
I'd make better use of my LMS and what it has to offer. I could ask for more budget comfortably. That's a big one.
Yeah, those are awesome. Great. Thank you. More?
We have more than this webinar could fit. A couple more would be, I'm able to directly connect the training to the results and show the cost and return on the event.
Okay.
Another is ROI is clearer. Program evaluation is identified. Success would be being able to show how our LMS's reporting can support other evidence that learning is occurring.
Great.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of these are along the same lines. It's a better way to be able to say this is working.
Yeah, awesome. So there's only so much that we can do with the time that we have remaining. Obviously, that comment about there's more than can fit in a webinar, that's probably true. So because we can't do a whole complete in-depth strategy that's going to allow you to, make an ROI report here in real time. Everyone's working with different LMSs, with different kinds of content, with different organizational needs. We'll be asking some questions, and I want for you who are watching, who are responding, answering these questions now, to keep jotting down notes of the questions that come up and the specific deliverables, that come up as you're watching. So I don't have like a handout that's got all the magic stuff right in a row. I actually used to do handouts with all my training, and I found that when people take notes, they actually do stuff. And when I give them a handout, for some reason, nothing much ever really happens, even though I pour my heart and soul into the handouts. If there's demand for a handout, if you'd like something like that, I can make something for you. But the real value is in you thinking about your specific use cases, your specific needs for reporting and for your LMS, and writing down those questions. So please do that as we continue through here. Now, obviously, it's great when we can write down that question and we can aim at our target and go. Sometimes those targets move while we're aiming for something. Sometimes the content we have is changing. Actually, pretty much all the time, the content that we have is changing. So there's also multiple goals that you're probably aiming towards, and being able to aim very specifically for one and hit that and then move to the next is probably a much better strategy than trying to aim for something that's in the middle of these 3 different goals, and then, split purposes, you're not going to hit any of them. But it's important that we declare what the goal is and that we know that we're at least pointing in the right direction. So if we're just shooting stuff out there, here's your content, Hopefully it's serving a learning need. Let's fire another course out there. Oh, somebody has a problem. Let's make a course. Hopefully it's serving a learning need, but if we haven't identified upfront what that is, this is the A in your ADDIE methodology. If you don't know what you're aiming for, your chances of hitting it are pretty slim. So hopefully, as you create better definition, you can know that what you're aiming your content for can actually hit that target. So in this analogy with the archery thing, I'm thinking of like the LMS is your bow and the courses, the content are the arrows that are flying here. So as those things are flying, they are also expiring. None of the content that you will ever make will be around forever. And it's really important to acknowledge that up front and design reporting strategies that will work for this. So hopefully it's not news to anyone that any content that you have that's using Flash by this time next year won't work. It might in some circumstances work for some people, but for most people, most of the time, broken. So the content itself, the delivery methodology is expiring. But the information within those courses is also changing. That slide I showed just a minute ago of Training Magazine, you know, the most recent numbers, a year from now that information will have changed. And I need to swap this out in my content, right? Well, when I do that, how does this affect my reporting? Is it the same information that I'm reporting on as someone being complete or as someone getting value out of that? Am I changing like if there's a test question that's linked, am I changing that? Is that enough to make it a new thing that we're reporting on? With any content that you create, there's an entire life cycle here. Hopefully you're already tracking how things go from the request stage to being an active developed project, something is being managed, that's going to launch, it launches, it goes live, great. And now it's on your LMS, now it's going out. But at some point it will go away, right? And there may be updates that are happening in there. So just as a baseline, I want to make it really clear that it's important for audit purposes that on your learning management, you are never deleting content that has been delivered to learners or that learners have completed, however it is that that's being measured, because you might need to go back and get that. A clear example is like a harassment prevention course or something like that. Even though it's 5-year-old content, if there's a lawsuit that comes up and you need to go back and get that and see exactly what it was that was taught in that course, you're going to need to bring that up, even if that course is no longer active anymore. So strategy for content, do not delete. Not if someone's completed it. We talked about Flash, you know, expiring all of the courses. But there's also learning management system updates that are constantly happening, changing the functionality, changing what you can report on, changing how reporting works. And I don't know if anyone's ever had the experience, but sometimes you change your learning management system. All of the records that exist that said this person was complete in this thing, or they marked this complete, or whatever, that makes sense to that system, but it would make slightly different sense in a different system. So it's important that you also retain all of the data. It doesn't have to be in that very system, maybe just some flat file export or something like that, but the information about things such as score or completion, any way that you would show a value or that someone learned something, that needs to be kept as well, even as you migrate from system to system, because it's context sensitive.
So Sam, we have a question on that slide. You mentioned to not delete learner completed data.
Yes.
Bill asks, under GDPR, can't a learner ask to have their completed data deleted?
They can ask to have it anonymized. It can be deleted. You'd have to go and talk with your legal team at your company to be able to figure out what kind of legal stance, because there's different opinions on the answer to that question. But one of the things that GDPR provides for is a way of making people's information theirs. But if we say we're to delete all of the records for someone who requested that their information be deleted, they're no longer with the company, so we delete that. They left in June, but they took this training in January. How many people took training this year? We don't need to delete that someone in January took training. We don't need to decrease the number of transcript records that there are in our learning management system. All we need to do is decouple it from any personally identifiable information. So there's a difference between deleting and anonymizing. And if you're using a learning management system that is GDPR compliant, as I think almost all of them are by now, they will have functions that you can do that. Maybe not admin functions, it may be a direct request to process it, but they're hip to this difference that I'm describing. Great question, thank you. All right, if I continue, or were there more questions?
There's one other question here that we can talk about here. Keith says, our main obstacle is senior leadership thinking that training is the silver bullet. Training is the new antibiotics. It cures everything.
Yeah, and just like antibiotics, you can get resistant learners, just like antibiotic resistant drugs. You know, you can put all of this training out there, but it is not the fix. Training is a great fix for certain types of problems, but they're not most of the problems in the organization. Most of the time, you don't need training at all. And so trying to report the ROI on something that really shouldn't have been training in the first place is a really dangerous thing to do. You end up falling into vanity metrics of like trying to prove the value of this thing that we spent so much money and time on, but really we should never have said yes to in the first place. If you know that you can't report value up front, then you probably shouldn't be making the content. And that is a difficult political battle to fight within a learning and development organization. We'll get to a bit more of some questions to ask around that in just a moment. But you're absolutely right. It is not a silver bullet. When you need training, nothing else will do. Training is very important, but it's not the solution to every problem. I'd like to dive into the hairiest problem right here with reporting, which is making updates to live content. This can make things really complicated. And it doesn't have to be that way if there's some questions that we can look at up front. So whenever there's live content, say an online course that's in your learning management system, and you want to make a change to it, it's a change that affects 3 different groups of people. It affects the people who don't know that that's there, who haven't registered for it yet. They don't have any status in that particular learning object. There's no transcript record. Those people will get whatever content your update is. They won't even know that there was old content because they weren't associated with it at all. But the people that had already started that content, they're in the middle of that online course. They've at least viewed the first page. They might be right on the very last question, about to answer and pass the course, and you make an update. How should this update affect them? How should this update affect your reporting? Do you want to just start them right back at the beginning? Or do you want to allow them the capability to get to the next page and the next page to finish what it is that you gave them originally? With that example earlier of the training magazine chart, if I have a question that's linked to that, you know, what were the total expenditures in the training industry in 2017 or something, if that's relevant. And then I swap out that slide and it no longer has 2017 on it. I don't want to test them on the thing that they didn't see, right? So sometimes it's important that we actually revoke access, displace people from where they are in the content, and start them back at the beginning. Many times it's not. It's just a minor update. There's no questions that are associated with it, but this is something that you need to ask up front as content is getting changed, because the reporting on the back end can get very complicated, and it's only important to complicate it when it matters to complicate it. You can keep it simple, but if you go the simple route and it needed to be something like, oh, well, we don't want people to start this and then get different questions at the end. We kind of need to keep these two separate tracks of things live at the same time so that these people can finish and roll off and these people just get the new stuff. There are times when you're going to want to do that, and you need to know the difference and be able to ask questions to illuminate that difference. And then the third group of people is people who already did it. It's on their transcript, they're done. Are they any less done because you made an update? Maybe, maybe not. Let's look at some of the questions here. Again, please be writing down some questions. Feel free to ask some in the chat here, but think of your specific use cases of a specific project that you've been working on in the last couple months. If there was an update to that, how would each type of learner record, such as completed, this is someone who's already completed the thing you've got out there, how should that learner record show up on reports? How would that differ from people who are in progress? They've started but not yet got to that complete part. What content should people get as a user experience when they go in? So it's on my transcript, I have it completed, I just want to go and review and see the updated information. To see the updated information. They don't want to see what they saw before. They want to see the new thing. So these are use cases here. Start thinking about this and write down some questions. What content should each type of learner be prevented from accessing? So, oh, there was a mistake in this course. We've got to get that out of there. That's embarrassing. In our harassment prevention course, we had all these pictures of someone who is fired for harassment. It would be really good if we took those out. Let's not let people see that anymore. What is it that learners, even if it's on their transcript, need to be prevented from seeing? And lastly, what kinds of notifications should they get, if any? Hey, you're in the middle of this course, just so you know, we reset it back to the beginning because we had to make some changes. Sorry, it's not generally a big deal if people know, but if you don't tell them and they go in and they're suddenly back at the beginning and like, wait, I was right on the last page. I was about to go back in and take the exam. That's a frustrating experience. You don't need to create that for your learners. You probably had some things like this happen before, I'm guessing.
Hey, Sam, before you dive on, I've got one more question here from Melody about version control. Do I need to label with version information, or does that normally get saved automatically by the LMS? For example, if I made updates to content and switched out a version of the SCORM, will the LMS know who took what version?
It depends on your LMS, first off. Many of them, yes, but it also depends on how you are making the update. When that version tracking is happening, is this a minor update? Am I just swapping files out? It used to point here in our file structure, and I just swapped out the content, so now it points here. That's very different than using the version control in your learning management system and incrementing up a new version. So not every LMS will do that, but the ones that do, they usually allow you to choose which kind of update, what's the level of update, what's that user experience that you want to create. And even if they don't allow that, maybe I'm publishing a brand new instance of this course. So it's got a totally separate learning object ID in the system. They don't even, the LMS doesn't even know these two things are connected. There's times when you're going to want to make an update like that, like say for an annual compliance training or something like that. This is the 2017 version. Here's the 2018 version. We need to keep track of these things separately because they're showing a different thing. In 2019's version, I don't care if you took that if it's regarding a legal issue which arises from 2017. We need to report on that separately. So again, these are great questions to ask, but there's not a definitive answer because it depends on a variety of factors. It depends on really what's important, which is what we're getting to here. You don't have all of these answers, and it's okay. You're not supposed to have all of these answers. It's a collaborative effort. Even if you are a training department of one, there's at least ops people who are going to receive reports that you're probably going to want to talk to figure out what is important to them. What do they actually care about? Am I creating this whole complex, series of reports that aren't really going to make a difference? What's the ROI on that? Like, what are the things that the organization cares about? Who is the person that's making the decision? Who's delivering the reports? And how can we tell that they have the right information in them? Most importantly, what's out of scope. So if we're tracking something like how many points or score someone got in a course, 80% pass fail. Great. Which questions did they miss? Well, we weren't tracking that. We were only tracking the score. You can't go back and determine that they selected B on question 4 rather than A because it wasn't reported in the first place. That learner experience, that content that the course knew, it didn't pass that to the LMS. The LMS is in the dark about that. So unless that's something that you know up front as a designer is important to track, it's not really worth tracking, right? We don't need to pass all of that data that's just going to clutter up our workflow later and make it more confusing later. But when it's important, we need that data to come from the course and to our LMS or LRS or however it is that you're gathering that. So some more questions to ask about this when it comes to the validation of stuff, the support really. Who is it that's going to investigate that issue and say, oh, well, it turns out that question number 4, answer B was actually the right answer, and for somehow it just made it through. We need to fix this. Or maybe the answer has changed. It used to be this, now it's this. Okay, great. Who's going to go in and not only make that change, but decide all of these things that we were just looking at with regards to the versioning of content? How much does it matter? This is something that you can know before anyone lifts a finger and starts a project, and probably that you should know before you begin, because no matter how you're reporting on it, this is not a technical issue. This is a structural issue. This is a team issue. And even if you do everything right and the reporting is all perfect, probably someone's going to have questions. Well, wait a minute, why is this person here? I don't need this person. Or, hey, this is only showing my score, but it's not. Wait, how many questions is this? Who's going to answer these questions? And knowing that stuff allows you to better fix it when it breaks. Who is going to fix it when it breaks? In your ADDIE strategy, as I was mentioning earlier, unless you have that metric identified up front as for what's going to make a difference to the people that it makes a difference to in the organization, this is bigger than just L&D. Unless you have that identified up front, you can't design to it, right? You can't make it something that is bolted on at the end. Oh, now we're going to do an ROI report. Great. But we don't know what our return is that we're looking for. Well, we can't put it on at the end. It's not a technical problem. Using XAPI won't fix it. It's a structural problem of how well you did your assessment at the beginning. So we mentioned content swapping. Here's some questions for you all to look at, like how do we substitute this? What is the learner experience? How is it displayed in our reports? Great questions to ask. Content states. We've got our content. It's moving from not being on the LMS at all to being there probably in an inactive state, so that maybe it's not appearing to anybody, or maybe it's been retired. It's still there. It didn't get deleted. Then we've got it in an active state. Great. So now people can take it. We can include it in a curriculum. We can do all sorts of stuff with it. And then hopefully we can go from that administrative active state to the actual live state where learners can get to it. I find it's really helpful to talk about content in these terms, going from active to live, and making sure that those are different things. Because if you want to include anything in your learning management system in some other structure or learning assignment or something like that, it generally needs to be active to do that. But when you're talking to stakeholders and you say it's active and they're like, whoa, 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 that doesn't launch till Tuesday. Don't scare me now. You need to have it active on Monday to make those associations. So it might be different for your organization. Maybe you already have this labeled, but oftentimes I walk into places and they don't have even common terminology that they use for this. So that's a suggestion that I would make for you. Content types. This varies by your learning management system, by what it is that you're making at your organization. Is this a package that we're uploading, or is it something that we're making within the learning management system? Many of them will allow you to make, say, an assessment, a quiz or an exam that has multiple choice questions, just like we were looking at before, but using tools within your LMS. Well, that's going to report very differently than things that you're making that are part of a package that's you're uploading. Here's the course with all the exams and everything. This goes here. That's the experience that learners will get. It's all self-contained, and we could put it on another learning management system. The reporting that you can do that way is just going to be different, not necessarily better or worse, but important to know, different than anything that you're going to create in your LMS. Because if you're trying to do a comparative analysis or to watch a trend over time, to do some of that ROI calculations, you have two different kinds of things. And it's going to take work to resolve the differences between those and to know what you're looking at. And then, of course, there's the aggregations of content. So I labeled it learning path here. Your learning management system might say curriculum. Some kind of way of putting things together that can be tracked. And then oftentimes there's the course level. You may have a different name for it, but this is a way of joining things together. We can track these things and we can have reports on these things. But then there's the individual modules. Maybe this is something that's an assessment that you're building in your learning management system. So we can assess it as part of a course, but can we assess it directly? Maybe, maybe not. Something to look into. What's the level of complete that we're looking for? Do we just want to know that someone has completed a program? That's generally what the folks in the organization are going to want to know. Or do we want to know that of all of our modules that are of the type assessment, we usually are having people answer in this way? None of the above. So we've got a none of the above option, and whenever we have that, people are selecting it. Is this something that's a trend for the module level? So what level here are you aiming for? What is your target with your content? And when we look at reporting, it's very easy to generate reports. meaningful reports, reports that actually communicate something that's of value to the organization, that's something that you will almost never get on the first try, because it's an inquisitive, iterative process. Being able to actually communicate what people actually want to know is quite a different thing. So again, I tend to talk in ways that are agnostic of learning management systems. So did somebody start it, or is it not started yet? Now this might be registered or in progress. It might be pending some action. There might be a past due function. Like how your LMS tracks this is variable according to your LMS. Did they stop doing it? It might be that, oh, we assigned this training to people and we messed up and then we de-assigned it to them. Okay. It might be that they didn't get their manager approval and there's a manager approval chain that they need in order to access this content. Okay. It could be just that it expired. It could be an event that they never showed up for, but in some capacity they stopped doing it. So this is something that you can communicate easily to other stakeholders. And it's not language that's so LMS specific that people won't really know what you're talking about. Stopped is different than finished, though. Finished meaning like done. So I can't do any more with it. Now this could be passed. It also could be failed. And we'll look at that here in just a moment. The important thing to notice here is it's not about tools, it's about people. It's about making decisions with people and making decisions about people, about real people, about the learners. What is the impact of their action and who's going to decide what about those people? That's what we want to stay focused on, because the tools will allow it to get extremely complicated. Might not really be what we need. So we want to look at what it is that's the solution that we are developing. What business need does it serve? And coming from this perspective, ROI is a much easier thing to keep track of, rather than what are all the things that we can know, because there's a lot of things to know. It probably is possible now that you could track the breathing rate of the learner and engage, some assessment of that. But that's like way more information than we need, probably not relevant. The technical part, the tools are probably not really the obstacle. It's the cognitive part. It's the thinking that's the heavy lifting. The upfront part that's the hard part. And we tend to just push that down the line and, deal with it later. The more upfront you can put that obstacle, the better you can engage it. So let's look at a couple types of reporting. And Andrew, I don't actually have a time check here. Can you let me know how we're doing on time?
Yeah, we got 15 minutes left.
Great. Okay. So let's go through in these final 15 minutes here some types of reporting. There is a type of reporting that is entirely on the LMS side, irrespective of content. This is a screenshot of what Cornerstone shows for a video. That's a real kind of content that the learner just on the honor system marks complete. The learning management system isn't tracking whether the video actually played or even could play or how much of it anyone watched. It's not possible to know that. It's just that the learner is clicking it. The content is not reporting anything. The LMS is just tracking that the learner clicked something. There's a second type of reporting. There's 5 here, which is the percentage viewed. So when this number increments up to the magic number, then maybe 100%, maybe 80%, however it is that it's being declared for that piece of content, then that person is complete. That person is done. But the learner isn't really, they're influencing this, but they're not really being assessed. So it might just be that they need to get to the last slide and they're done. Might be that they just need to view 80% of the video and they're done. A third type is tracking scores. Here's where assessments come into play. So there's more than one way to track scores. And if you don't know which way you're using, you're in trouble. You might not know it yet. Tracking positive scores, this is the kind of infinite retake exam. You never fail. You just are in progress. The course might know you took this exam and you failed. You took this exam and you failed. You took this exam and you failed. You did it 50 times. But the LMS doesn't know this. The LMS only sees this person registered, they started, and I'm waiting to hear that they passed. But the LMS is not tracking any negative scores. The course is giving the user an experience of trying and failing and trying and failing, but it's not passing that failure to the LMS. A lot of content is set up this way. Probably 80% of the content that I see is set up this way. It's a perfectly valid way to set up content. It is entirely appropriate until the moment that you want to know if someone failed. The course has to tell the LMS in order to know that on the LMS side. Otherwise, the learner will have one experience, but all of our reporting won't align with that. So if it's important to know that someone is failing, say you want to have a pre-assessment or some kind of activity that's a test out activity, well, then you're going to want to have a negative score that's being tracked at the LMS level. So this is where you can have complete and failed. Now, maybe you're doing reporting like this already. Not everyone does. Not everyone needs to. It's important that you know what it is that you're going to need later. So in a test out kind of option, we want to know if someone failed. We don't want to leave them in progress forever. If they failed, then we need to assign this training to them. If they passed, great. But we need to track that fail so that the learning management system can direct them to the right place. Now, oftentimes, this decision between are we just going to track positive scores or are we going to track negative scores too, that's not just a content level decision, that's an LMS level decision. It's a global change. So really important that this is something that comes up in your LMS configuration and that you're working with your vendor or your LMS team to be able to communicate what it is that's going to be needed to get the design that you want. And then lastly, it is possible to do both, to track multiple attempts. But boy, that's a lot of data. So if you're tracking that they took this exam and they failed it, and that stores in the LMS, but the LMS allows them to retake the exam. They're not entering necessarily the same content. It's a new transcript record. It's a new line in that table. Okay, here they go. Now they're going in this time. What is their score? Now we can track. They got 60% the first time, 65% the second time, they got 30% the third time, and they got 90% the last time. Now we have each of those as separate transcript records. Now we can report on usage over time. We can report on a single user's experience based on all of the times that the user's experience in that course was passed to the LMS. But important thing to note here, we just want to know if someone's passed or in progress or complete. In this kind of reporting, that is not an either or question. There are multiple right answers to this question. I just want to know their final score. Oh, okay, well that's different. Yes, we can report on the most recent record in the database. Cool. But it's variable here as to what you're going to use, what you're going to be able to report on. So I want to know all the people who failed in that multiple attempt tracking model. Well, you're going to see people there who failed, but also passed. So when the business comes and says, well, show me all the people who failed, we need to give them, some additional counseling or manager conversation or something like that. It's really important not to just go to the LMS and pull all the people that failed, because people who passed later on in their transcript will also be in that report. And maybe they are perpetually in progress for some of these things too, because we made an update to the training along the way. They're never going to finish it. So they can be both passed and failed and in progress in different transcript records at the same time. It doesn't matter how you're reporting on this. Again, SCORM, AICC, XAPI, none of this has even come into the picture yet. This is just the conceptual elements of how it is that you are going to assess and structure a report. Is that making sense? I hope so. To get to a winning content strategy, again, just to circle back, we want to know what counts as much as we can about why it's important, what kind of range we're planning for, and what does that winning score look like? If we're looking at score, is that the 80% pass-fail, or is it common thing that I see wrong all the time? It's an 80% pass-fail and there's 4 questions. It's not an 80% pass-fail. It's statistically impossible. You have 100% pass-fail, because if I score 3 out of 4, I just got 75%, which is below 80, things like that. So keeping track of how it is that this winning score is known, how we're going to decide what that means in our organization, what it is we're going to report on, what it is that we're going to track, and how it is that we're going to say that, so that the failure that happens is something that hopefully those fingers aren't pointing towards you. It's something that we can front load. We can put at the beginning. What does failure look like here? When a learner fails, how do we report that? Where is that going to go? And what's going to happen as a result? Hopefully you can keep track of these learner states, content states, and track these failures, not as things that are bad failures, but as things that allow you to better aim that arrow next time, to better determine that target, to iteratively improve the content that you create and the system that you're using to deliver it. So with that, I'll acknowledge there are a lot of competing priorities out there, and we're just make sure that you have some measure and that it's aligning with what is important in your organization. So I think that's about what I've got for you today. I'd love to have some more questions if there's any that have come up, Andrew.
Yeah, we've got a couple questions we can take here. Casey asked, do you find it's better to utilize the features within the LMS, such as creating an assessment directly in the LMS, or to utilize a program like Adobe Articulate or Captivate to create the assessment? I'm struggling with this because while Adobe can make it prettier, we can't utilize any of the custom reports that our LMS provides if we're inputting a SCORM file.
Yes, great question. And there's no definitive right answer. It really depends on what's important in your organization. Is the user experience more important, or is the reporting more important? And you might not be the person to make that decision, but you are absolutely the person to surface the question. This is where the genius content strategy part comes in. Asking the questions is what makes it smart. It's not having the answers. The answers are going to involve working with other people. Asking the questions is the smart thing here. So I don't know the answer for your particular organization. I will say typically I like to do things that are agnostic. I like to do stuff that's not built just into one LMS, because I have had the joy and pleasure of migrating stuff from one LMS to another, and they generally don't have good export functionality to be able to take an assessment that's using an LMS's internal exam functionality. The export is usually really weak if it exists at all. So my tendency is to do things as a developer in like a SCORM compliant format or something like that, just so I'm not creating that problem. But If you need that report, and that's the only way to get it, okay, game on, reporting time. Other questions?
We don't have any other questions here. If anybody is having questions that are just popping up right now into your heads, don't forget you can reach out to Sam offline in an online way at Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, synapse.com as well. I also want to point out that we here at eLearning Brothers are giving away iPads. I kind of feel like that's an important thing to mention to everybody.
Oh yeah, I want an iPad. How do I get an iPad?
Yeah, let me share my screen here. So we are giving away one iPad every business day for the first 3 weeks of December. All you need to do is register to or schedule a demo with eLearning Brothers and learn the best way to create training awesomeness, and you'll be entered to win an iPad for that day, the day that you schedule your appointment. So they're on the left side of the screen. Details at elearningbrothers.com/webinar iPad giveaway 2018, and I'll also include that link in the email later today. Yeah, webinar iPad giveaway 2018. That's where you can go ahead and register to win an iPad. Why buy an iPad for the holidays when you could, win one for free? So definitely do that.
They just announced some new ones. Are these the new ones, or are they the new ones?
I believe these are the new ones, not necessarily the new ones.
Okay,
I'll have to double check on that, but they're brand new and they're nice. So definitely register for an iPad here, and we'll be happy to enter you in that drawing. Thank you so much, Sam, for your awesome presentation. Very helpful. We have a lot of people that are very excited to use this information as they move on, and they may reach out with more questions for you, Sam, so be ready for that. And thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks everyone.